Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let us continue with our tafsir of Surah An-Nisaa bihawlillahi wa quwwatih. Ayah number 91. قال الله تعالى: ستجدون آخرين يريدون أن يأمنوكم ويأمنوا قومهم كلما ردوا إلى الفتنة أركسوا فيها فإن لم يعتزلوكم ويلقوا إليكم السلام ويكفوا أيديهم فخذوهم واقتلوهم حيث ثقفتموهم وأولئكم جعلنا لكم عليهم سلطانا مبينا. He says you will find another type of people. So this is the third type of people now, if we include the previous two types of people in the last ayah. So in the last ayah, we had the first type of people who join another group with whom you have a peace treaty, so you're not allowed to attack such people now, because you're not allowed to break the peace treaty. And the second type of group who come to you on the battlefield, but their hearts are constricted, meaning they do not wish to fight you, nor do they wish to fight their own people, meaning the kuffar. Just like Al-Abbas, the Prophet's uncle, during the Battle of Badr, Allah Jalla wa Ala told us that He has not given us an authority to fight them, meaning to say a warrant. But these types of people in this ayah, these third types of people, He says, yuriduna, they want an ya'manukum, from aman, safety, they want to be safe from you, wa ya'manu qawmahum, and they want to be safe from their people, meaning their fellow kuffar. This ayah is talking about the munafiqeen, who pretend to be Muslimin, but inwardly they are aiding and abetting the kuffar against the Muslims. He says about these munafiqeen, كُلَّمَا رُدُّوا إِلَى الْفِتْنَةِ, every time they are sent back to al-fitna, to the trials, that is to say, they are called to shirk. أُرْكِسُوا فِيهَا, we talked about this word, meaning they return to it, they return to kufr, and they yield to kufr. So here Allah Jalla wa Ala tells us that if such people do not يَعْتَزِلُوكُمْ, keep away from you, or withdraw from you, that is to say, not to fight you, وَيُلْقُوا إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامَ, literally means to throw peace at you, meaning to say offer you peace. Now how do they do that? By obeying the ahkam of the sharia. وَيَكُفُّوا أَيْدِيَهُمْ, and restrain their hands, meaning to say do not fight you, or otherwise harm you. So if they do not do these three things, that is to say keep away from you and not harm you, and also submit to the ahkam of the sharia, and also refrain from fighting you or harming you. So if they do not do all these three things, then فَخُذُوهُمْ, then seize them, as in to say take them prisoners of war. وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ, and execute them. حَيْثُ ثَقِفْتُمُوهُمْ, wherever you find them. Originally, the word thaqaf means to be skillful in comprehending a matter or mastering a particular craft or an art. But in this context it means wherever you find them and have ability to seize them. And he ends by saying that those types of people, we have given you a sultanan mubinan, a clear warrant to fight them and treat them as a harbi. So pondering over this ayah, we may pick up a few points of benefit. We learn that we need to know our enemies. Look how in these last 4 ayat, Allah Jalla wa Ala tells us about the different types of kuffar and how best to deal with each of them. So this is all about military planning and military intelligence and getting to know your enemies. So there are practical military applications to this ayah in our day and age. We also notice how you can yield to the temptation of kufr and shirk if you are not truthful in your iman. As for if you are firm in your iman, you will never yield to kufr. And we also find that if these munafiqeen who are aiding and abetting the kuffar, if they do not withdraw from the Muslimin, meaning do not harm the Muslimin or fight them, and if they do not yield to the ahkam of the Sharia, then we are allowed to fight such people, and they are to be treated as harbiyun, those at war. Ayah 92. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ أَنْ يَقْتُلَ مُؤْمِنًا إِلَّا خَطَأً وَمَنْ قَتَلَ مُؤْمِنًا خَطَأً فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ وَدِيَةٌ مُسَلَّمَةٌ إِلَى أَهْلِهِ إِلَّا أَنْ يَصَّدَّقُوا فَإِنْ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمٍ عَدُوٍّ لَكُمْ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ وَإِنْ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ مِيثَاقٌ فَدِيَةٌ مُسَلَّمَةٌ إِلَى أَهْلِهِ وَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ تَوْبَةً مِنْ اللَّهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. This particular ayah, Mujahid says, was revealed about a man called Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'ah. He was the half-brother of Abu Jahl from the mother's side. So he was the uterine brother of Abu Jahl. He embraced Islam. And another man, at that time a kafir, called Al-Harith ibn Yazid, tortured Ayyash because of his Islam. However, later on, Al-Harith ibn Yazid embraced Islam himself. But Ayyash, wanting revenge on Al-Harith, did not know this. He killed him out of revenge. So this was a killing, but it was not intentional killing. As in to say, Ayyash thought that Al-Harith was a harbi and therefore halal to be killed. As for the words of this ayah, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ, it is not for a mu'min, meaning it is not right and proper and valid for a mu'min to kill another mu'min, except that it should be out of khata, meaning a genuine mistake. Notice khata'an is mansub bil fatha. Why is this? It is a hal of the fa'il, of the doer, meaning of the killer, that he is killing out of a mistake. So in that case, he does not carry the sin of intentional murder. And he says, whoever kills a believer out of a mistake, then there is some expiation which he needs to give. Tahrir, meaning liberation, to liberate, a raqaba, a neck. This refers to liberating a servant from servitude. A raqaba mu'mina, a believing servant, because you never free a kafir servant. That is just encouraging him to remain a kafir. And the wisdom behind freeing a servant is because you have taken a life, so it is only fitting that you free a life from servitude, as it's the next best thing you can do, because you obviously cannot bring the dead person back to life. وَدِيَةٌ, diya is blood money. مُسَلَّمَةٌ, submitted or delivered. إِلَى أَهْلِهِ, to his family, meaning to the inheritors of the deceased. إِلَّا أَن يَصَّدَّقُوا, meaning to say they forego it. So they say, we do not wish for the blood money. So it's like they're giving it away as sadaqah. So these are two things which one is instructed to do. One may ask, but if it is an accidental killing, this is not sinful, so why does one have to offer the kafara? The answer is, firstly, the blood money is easy to answer. You've taken a life and you need to make amends. Just because it's accidental does not mean that the rights of other people are now waived off from you. If you damage somebody's property accidentally, does that mean you do not have to pay for the damages? Of course not. As for the freeing a servant, then this is the right of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And this is because even if it was accidental, there was still some level of shortcoming on your part. As in, you were not careful enough. And it is not fitting that you should take a life, even if it is accidentally, and then just go about your business as if nothing has happened. No, rather, there needs to be some sort of amends that need to be made. And freeing a servant is the next best thing to bringing the dead back to life. Then he goes on to say, if he is, meaning the deceased, whom you killed accidentally, from a qawm, from a people, aduwwun lakum, who are enemies to you, so he's from a community who is at war with the Muslimin, but the deceased himself is a Muslim, but he is living amongst the kuffar. That's why he says, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِن, and he is a believer, so he's not a kafir. Then the expiation is فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ, freeing a believing servant. But note, here he does not mention blood money. Now why would this be? Because this mu'min who is living amongst the kuffar, his inheritors are going to be kuffar. And remember, these kuffar are at war with the Muslimin. So you'll essentially be paying these kuffar money. So basically you're funding the harbiyun. And they're only going to use this money to fight against you. However, what if the kuffar, who are the inheritors of the deceased Muslim, are not at war? Is the blood money paid to them in that case? The answer is still no. Why is that? Because the blood money is from the inheritance. And we know that the kuffar do not inherit from the Muslim, and nor vice versa. As for if the person who is a harbi that you killed was a kafir, then there is no blood money, no kafara, because the person you killed was not an innocent person. His blood was halal in the first place. That's what it means to be a harbi. But as for the kafara, then yes, that does make sense, because it is the right of Allah Jalla wa Ala, which needs to be observed. And then he goes on, that if he is, meaning the deceased, whom you have killed accidentally, from a people, بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ مِيثَاقٌ, you have a covenant with such people, meaning a peace treaty. So this person now is a kafir, but he is from those kuffar with whom you have a peace treaty. So you're not allowed to harm such people because you must respect the treaty. So if this is the case, and you've accidentally killed such a kafir, then he says, فَدِيَةٌ مُسَلَّمَةٌ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ, then blood money delivered to his inheritors. وَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ, and to free a believing neck, meaning a believing servant. So this third category is just like the first category. In other words, this kafir is treated just like a Muslim. Of course, the blood money of a kafir is half that of a Muslim. We know that from other evidence. Then he says, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ, whoever does not find, meaning does not find a believing servant to free, then there is an alternative. فَصِيَامُ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ تَوْبَةً مِنَ اللَّهِ, and fasting 2 consecutive months. Tawbatan min Allah. Tawbah is mansub al-fatha. Why? It is a hal of the fa'il. So tawbatan would basically mean ta'iban min Allah, seeking repentance from Allah. It's also possible that it is a maf'ulun mutlaq for emphasis, so that it would read, let him repent a tawbatan min Allah. فَلْيَتُبْ tawbatan min Allah. But the فَلْيَتُبْ is mahdhuf, because it is implied and known. So these are 2 ways of looking at it. And then he ends by saying that Allah was always the Alim, the knowledgeable, and the Hakiman, the wise. So that is knowledgeable about his creation and wise in his judgments about them, including the judgment of accidental killing. So reflecting on this ayah, we take that it is haram and impermissible to kill another believer intentionally. That is, of course, unless it is with due right, such as if you have to carry out a rightful execution, or you have to fight the Ahlul Baghi, and so on. Or maybe if you have to defend yourself from an assailant. So these are exceptional circumstances. But what the ayah is talking about here is without due right. When he says إِلَّا خَطَأً, except by mistake, it does not mean it is permissible to kill a mu'min by mistake. In fact, that would not make sense. How can you intentionally go out to kill a mu'min by mistake? That would be intending to do something unintentionally, that is obviously a contradiction. But what the ayah means to say here is that accidental killing does not incur the same sin. We also find the wisdom of the Sharia in that it differentiates between intentional and accidental killing, because those two are vastly different. We also find that Allah Jalla wa Ala really wants us to free believing servants, because a free believer can worship Allah Jalla wa Ala more freely than a servant. And effective ibadah is obviously superior to handicapped ibadah. But of course it has to be a believing servant, not a kafir. Freeing a kafir servant just encourages him to continue on the path of kufr. Okay, does it have to be a male servant or a female servant? The answer is it does not matter. As long as the servant is a believer, then this is all important. Because the ayah does not specify one way or the other. We find the grand nature of taking a life, even if it is accidentally. Because normally, when you commit a sin accidentally, there is no sin. And yet, with killing, you have to offer a kafara, even if it was accidentally. And this is because taking a life is from the greatest of actions, which cannot be reversed. So the gravity of such an action is such that even in an accidental killing, you have to offer a kafara. We also have another question. This servant who is freed, should he be free from defects? Most scholars say yes. The freed servant not only must be a Muslim, but must be free of defects, which significantly hinder his ability to work. Because if he has defects which significantly hinder his ability to work, then he's just going to be dependent on other people, rather than be independent and work for himself. So it's just better off him remaining as a servant. And the other point is that if you free a significantly defective servant, then this would be like giving poor quality wealth in charity, which Allah Jalla wa Ala does not accept. However, a minor disability does not affect the matter. So if he has one finger cut off, this is not significant enough that he will not be able to work. But if he has a whole hand cut off, then this definitely is significant. So as for what is significant and not significant, we need to take a look at each example and examine it individually. We also find the obligation of the blood money, and that is a right of the inheritors. This could be paid all in one lump sum, or it could be paid in installments. This is an ijtihadi matter. The hakim will decide. We also know from the sunnah that the diya, the blood money, is given by the aqila, if they are able to do so. And the detail of that is really in the books of fiqh. And also how much the blood money is. All of these details are fiqhi matters, which do not immediately concern us. We can also take that the inheritors may choose to forgive and not take the blood money. However, this needs some consideration, because sometimes it is better not to forgive. If the person is penitent truly, then it is better to forgive. But if we have someone like a repeat offender and someone who is not penitent, then for such a person, punishment is the best option. We also find that those kuffar with whom there is a peace treaty, then they are not allowed to be killed, and killing them accidentally incurs blood money and a kafara, just like killing a Muslim. Although the blood money itself is different, it is half. We also take that if someone is unable to free a servant, then they are to fast 2 consecutive lunar months. And you're not allowed to break the consecutiveness except for a valid reason. Otherwise, you have to begin all over again. However, if you are, let's say, unable to fast the 2 consecutive months due to medical conditions or old age or whatever else, then can we say that you then have to feed 60 poor people, as is the case with zihar and intercourse with the wife during the daytime of Ramadan? The answer is no. There is no analogy. Because if feeding 60 poor people was legislated, then Allah Jalla wa Ala would have said so. Just like He says in the ayah of the zihar in Surah Al-Mujadilah. But in this ayah He noticeably does not mention it when he ought to have mentioned it. So what does this mean? It means that it is not legislated to feed 60 poor people. Now some scholars do make an analogy and they do say you feed 60 poor people, but what appears to be the case from the evidence is that you do not. Also, it should be noted that if the inheritors of the deceased forego the blood money, then that does not mean that you do not have to offer the kafara of the freeing a servant or 2 consecutive months of fasting. Why? Because the blood money is the right of the inheritors and the kafara is the right of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So they're 2 different things, must not be conflated. We also take from this ayah the 2 names of Allah Jalla wa Ala, Alim and Hakim, along with their attributes. Ayah 93. وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعْنَهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. This ayah speaks about intentional killing, which is what we would call murder. Whoever kills a mu'min, a believer, muta'ammidan, meaning intentionally, فَجَزَاؤُهُ, then his recompense is Jahannam, the fire of hell. خَالِدًا فِيهَا, the word khalidan can mean forever, but it can also mean a long time, which is what the intended meaning is here. A long time, it does not mean forever. And Allah is angry with him, وَلَعْنَهُ, and curses him, which means banishes him from his mercy, وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ, and has prepared for him, أَعَدَّ يُعِدُّ إِعْدَادًا, to prepare, عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا, a great torment, meaning in Jahannam. Reflecting on this ayah, we find the grave nature of intentional murder. We also notice that Allah Jalla wa Ala does not mention a kafara. So if He does not mention a kafara, and the time and place in this ayah is fitting for Him to mention a kafara, but if He still does not mention it, where you would think He ought to mention it, then what does that show us? It shows us that there is no kafara. There is no freeing a believing servant or fasting 2 consecutive lunar months if you are unable to find a servant. And this is indeed the case. And the reason is because intentional murder is far more serious than just to wash the sin away with a kafara. It requires sincere repentance. And so even intentional murder can be repented from. As for Abdullah ibn Abbas saying that the murderer has no tawbah, then either we say that that is his ijtihad and we do not agree with it because of other numerous evidence that we have in the Quran and the Sunnah, or it may be interpreted to mean that such a person has no tawbah with regards to the one who is murdered, because of course you cannot bring the deceased back to life. In any case, the correct viewpoint is that even the intentional murder does have tawbah, and Allah Jalla wa Ala can forgive such a person. Only shirk, if you die upon it, cannot be forgiven. Everything else can be forgiven. And every single sin underneath the sun does have a tawbah before you die, even shirk. So a person is a kafir, he repents from his kufr and embraces Islam, then of course that is good enough, as long as he does it before his death. The ayah does not mention blood money. You would think there is no blood money. However, we have from other narrations in the ahadith that there is blood money, and it is more severe than the blood money of the accidental killing. And the details of that is a fiqhi matter. We also know from other evidence that the inheritors of the deceased have the right to take the life of the murderer, as long as it is proved that he murdered intentionally. So they can either take his life or forgive him in the qisas and take the blood money instead. They also have the option to forgive both, that is, to neither take his life nor take blood money. So 3 options in total. We take from this ayah that Allah is angry with such a person, so anger is from the attributes of Allah. Also cursing, banishing people away from His mercy, those who deserve that, is also from His attributes. and preparing for such people a great torment is also from his attributes. And so all in all, this ayah is harrowing, and such a threat is fitting for such a grave and cardinal sin. So this would be his punishment unless he repents, because if a person repents sincerely, then he does escape from the punishment. هذا والله أعلم.